The clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation filled the room, creating an atmosphere of joy that was almost palpable. I stood by the entrance of the grand ballroom, watching as my wife, Claire, basked in the glory of her victory. The annual wine competition had just concluded, and her Chardonnay had taken first place. The applause and cheers that greeted her as she accepted her award were deafening, but her radiant smile seemed to drown out all the noise. It was a moment of triumph not just for her, but for both of us. After all, we had invested so much time and effort into perfecting that bottle of wine. As I looked around the room, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Claire's exuberance was infectious. She moved through the crowd with an ease and grace that captivated everyone around her. But as I watched her from afar, I noticed a familiar face among the crowd. Jason Bennett, one of the judges for the competition. He was tall, with a well-groomed beard and a demeanor that spoke of authority. I had met him briefly earlier that day, and he had struck me as a man of few words but keen observation. The evening progressed with a lavish celebration. Champagne flowed freely, and the energy in the room was electric. Claire, however, seemed especially drawn to Jason. I saw her approach him several times, her laughter mingling with his as they spoke in hushed tones. At first, I thought nothing of it. After all, it was natural for the winner to be excited about meeting the judges. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I caught glimpses of their interactions, a touch that lingered a little too long, a smile that seemed a bit too intimate. It was subtle, but it was there. I tried to brush it aside, convincing myself that I was being overly paranoid. Later, when the party had begun to wind down, Claire and I walked to our car. Her eyes were still shining from the evening's events, but I noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed distant, preoccupied. I tried to engage her in conversation about the night, but her responses were brief, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course," she replied, a bit too quickly. "Just tired, I guess." The drive home was quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional glance I stole at her. I could sense that something had shifted, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw Jason Bennett's figure in the distance, heading in a different direction. A fleeting thought crossed my mind, but I pushed it aside, hoping that my concerns were nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. When we got home, Claire excused herself to take a long bath, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I replayed the night's events in my mind, focusing on the small, seemingly insignificant moments that now seemed to hold a different meaning. I wanted to believe that I was just being paranoid, but a nagging doubt remained. I had hoped that tonight's celebration would be a perfect end to a perfect day, but instead, it had left me with an unsettling feeling that I couldn't ignore. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I wondered what lay ahead for us, and if this was just the beginning of something I was not yet ready to face. In the weeks that followed the wine competition, life seemed to return to its normal rhythm. Claire's victory had brought a renewed sense of purpose to her winemaking, and she was busier than ever, experimenting with new blends and refining her techniques. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us since that night. I began noticing small changes in Claire's behavior. She would often mention new developments or insights about winemaking that seemed to stem from conversations with Jason Bennett. It wasn't unusual for her to be enthusiastic about her work, but the frequency and depth of these discussions seemed new. The way she spoke of him was always respectful, but carried an undertone of something more, a hint of admiration that felt almost too intense. One evening, Claire came home late from a wine tasting event. She was glowing, but it wasn't just from the wine. She had a certain sparkle in her eyes, and her cheeks were flushed. I could tell she'd had a good time, but I couldn't help but notice that she had been in contact with Jason again. Her phone had been buzzing throughout the day with messages from him, and although she insisted they were just about the competition, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. As the days went by, Claire's absences became more frequent. She was often out for meetings or tastings, and when she was home, she seemed distracted. She would frequently check her phone and excuse herself to take calls in private. I tried to give her space, assuming she was simply absorbed in her work, but my concern grew with each passing day. One afternoon while Claire was out, I decided to take a look at her phone. I didn't like the idea of invading her privacy, but I was desperate for some clarity. I found a series of messages between Claire and Jason that were more personal than I had anticipated. They discussed their shared interests and experiences, but some of their exchanges were flirtatious and contained inside jokes that seemed to go beyond mere professional rapport. The discovery was a gut punch. My heart raced as I read through the messages, piecing together a narrative that I had been reluctant to acknowledge. It became clear that their relationship was not just professional, but had crossed into something more intimate. When Claire came home that evening, I confronted her with what I'd found. My voice trembled as I spoke, a mix of anger and hurt evident in my tone. "Claire, we need to talk. I saw the messages between you and Jason. What's going on?" Her reaction was immediate and defensive. "What messages? I don't know what you're talking about." I showed her the screenshots, and she went pale. The initial shock quickly turned into anger. "You had no right to go through my phone," she exclaimed. I tried to remain calm, but the betrayal stung deeply. "I had to know. It's clear that something's been going on between you two. You've been distant, and this is just too much." Claire's anger softened into something more sorrowful. She admitted to having feelings for Jason, but insisted that it was a result of emotional confusion and not something she had planned. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice breaking. It just happened." The conversation was painful and fraught with emotion. I felt a mix of betrayal, sadness, and confusion. I wanted to understand how we had arrived at this point, and whether there was any way to salvage what we had once had. Claire promised to end her contact with Jason and focus on our relationship, but the damage had been done. I was left with a heart full of questions and a deep sense of uncertainty about our future. The days following our confrontation were a blur of strained conversations and uneasy silences. Claire had indeed cut off contact with Jason, but the trust between us was shattered. I was determined to rebuild it, but the process was far from straightforward. One afternoon, I found myself working from home, trying to focus on my tasks. Claire had gone out to run errands, but I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over me. As I worked, my mind kept drifting back to the details of her affair and the subtle changes in her behavior. I began to notice other signs that had previously slipped under my radar. For example, Claire's recent fashion choices had been noticeably different. She had started wearing new outfits that I didn't recognize, more fashionable, more striking. When I asked her about them, she brushed it off, saying she had simply updated her wardrobe. Another peculiar change was in the frequency of her phone calls. Claire seemed to be on the phone constantly, whether it was during the day or late into the night. Her conversations were always private, and when I asked who she was talking to, she would give vague answers. Her growing secrecy was like a constant low-grade irritation that I couldn't ignore. One evening, while Claire was in the shower, I decided to check her phone again. This time, I found a series of missed calls and voicemails from an unknown number. It was a number I hadn't seen before, and it wasn't saved in her contacts. Curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to the voicemails. The messages were brief but friendly, someone checking in, asking how she was doing, and expressing hope to see her soon. I immediately felt a pang of jealousy and concern. I didn't recognize the voice, and it certainly didn't sound like Jason. I was left with even more questions about who this person might be, and whether Claire was still involved in something she had claimed to end. That evening, when Claire came down for dinner, I broached the subject carefully. "I heard some messages on your phone. Who is this new contact?" Claire's face hardened, and she looked genuinely upset. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've been open with you about everything." I tried to keep my tone steady. "I just want to understand what's going on. It feels like you're hiding something." Her frustration was palpable. "I'm not hiding anything. I'm trying to move forward, but it's hard when you keep questioning me. If you can't trust me, then what are we even doing?" Her reaction made me question if I was being overly suspicious, or if there was something else going on. I wanted to believe her, but the trust we once had was eroded, and every small detail seemed to fuel my doubts. Later that night, I found myself unable to sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation and the recent events in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the problem wasn't just the affair itself, but the lingering uncertainty and the feeling that something still wasn't right. Claire's attempts to rebuild our relationship felt genuine, but the cracks in our trust were deep. I couldn't shake the sense that there was more beneath the surface, and the mystery of the unknown number only added to my growing sense of unease. I knew I had to address these feelings, but the prospect of confronting Claire again was daunting. I needed to find a way to get to the bottom of things and understand what was really going on, but I also had to be careful not to let my suspicions destroy what little remained of our connection. The days following our discussion were marked by a tense calm. Claire had made an effort to be more present and engaged, but the atmosphere in our home remained strained. I could sense her genuine attempt to mend our relationship, but I also felt a persistent undercurrent of disquiet that I couldn't ignore. One Saturday morning, Claire and I decided to visit a local farmer's market. It had been a while since we'd spent a relaxed day together, and I hoped that a change of scenery might help us reconnect. As we strolled through the market, Claire seemed more animated than usual, engaging in friendly banter with the vendors and showing an enthusiasm that I hadn't seen in a while. While we were browsing the stalls, Claire's phone buzzed in her purse. She fished it out, glanced at the screen, and quickly put it back without saying a word. The gesture was subtle, but it caught my attention. I tried to dismiss it as me being overly sensitive, but the nagging feeling persisted. Later that day, we returned home, and Claire excused herself to take a nap. I decided to use the time to catch up on some work in my study. As I was going through some papers, I noticed Claire's purse sitting on the table. I hesitated, knowing that snooping was a breach of trust, but curiosity got the better of me. I rummaged through her purse, finding the usual items, her wallet, keys, and a few makeup products. But then I came across something that made my heart skip a beat. A receipt from a high-end boutique. The date on the receipt was recent, and the items purchased included a new dress and accessories. Claire had mentioned shopping for a few new pieces, but I didn't remember her mentioning anything about this particular store. My curiosity was piqued further when I noticed that the boutique was located in a part of town that was far from our usual haunts. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps Claire had simply wanted to treat herself, but the feeling of unease grew stronger. When Claire woke up, I asked her about the boutique. "I found a receipt from a store you've never mentioned before. Did you go shopping there recently?" Claire looked momentarily taken aback. "Oh, that. I went there to buy a gift for a friend. I didn't think it was important." I could tell from her reaction that she was uncomfortable with the question. "A gift for a friend? I don't recall you mentioning this friend before." "It was a last-minute decision," Claire said, her voice defensive. I didn't think it was a big deal. Her defensiveness made me suspicious. I wanted to believe her, but every small detail seemed to add to my growing concerns. I decided to let it go for the moment, but the incident left me with a lingering sense of doubt. Later that week, I noticed another troubling sign. Claire was spending more time on her phone, often taking calls in private. She was more frequently out of the house for what she described as errands or appointments, but the timing seemed too coincidental. One evening, I came home early to find Claire in the middle of a phone call. She was speaking softly, but I could catch snippets of her conversation. "I miss you too," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "Can we meet soon?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to keep my composure, but my heart was racing. When Claire ended the call, I confronted her immediately. "Who was that?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Claire's face went pale and she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "It was just a friend. I didn't realize I was so loud." "Claire, this has to stop," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't keep living like this. I need to know what's really going on." Claire's response was a mix of frustration and guilt. "I'm trying to make things right, but it's hard when you're constantly suspicious. I need space to sort things out." The conversation ended with Claire retreating to another room, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts. The signals I was receiving were troubling, and the lack of clarity only made the situation worse. I was caught between wanting to trust Claire and the overwhelming evidence that something was still amiss. As I lay awake that night, I realized that I needed to find out the truth. My heart told me that there was more to the story, and I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that had taken root in my mind. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew that I had to confront the issues directly to find some semblance of resolution. With each passing day, my sense of unease grew. Despite Claire's attempts to mend our relationship, her actions were consistently feeding my doubts. I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but the mounting evidence of her continued deceit was becoming impossible to ignore. One evening, as Claire was out for yet another meeting, I found myself alone at home. I decided to take a closer look at her phone again. The sense of guilt and invasion of privacy was overwhelming, but the necessity of understanding the truth outweighed my reservations. This time, I discovered something that made my heart sink further. In Claire's text messages, I found an exchange between her and a contact named Maggie. The messages were casual, but had a distinct undertone of secrecy. Maggie seemed to know about Claire's recent activities and mentioned something about a private dinner that had taken place. The date on the messages was recent, and they included vague references to meeting up and talking about the future. The name Maggie didn't ring any bells for me. I tried searching Claire's contact list for any mention of her, but there was no entry. The lack of a proper contact seemed suspicious, and I couldn't help but wonder if Maggie was another alias or a new person in Claire's life. The next day, while Claire was at home, I confronted her about the messages. I found texts between you and someone named Maggie. Who is she, and why are you keeping her contact a secret? Claire's face flushed with surprise and then quickly turned defensive. Maggie is just a friend. I didn't think it was important to mention her. Why would you keep her a secret? I pressed. The messages suggest there's something more going on. Claire's frustration was evident. I'm not hiding anything. Maggie's just someone I met recently. It's nothing more than that. Her evasive response only deepened my concerns. I decided to investigate further, hoping to find more concrete answers. I started by looking into any recent changes in Claire's routine. I discovered that many of her appointments and errands coincided with times when she was reportedly meeting Maggie or other mysterious contacts. The most troubling discovery came when I found an envelope hidden in Claire's drawer. Inside was a series of photographs showing Claire and a man I didn't recognize. They were candid shots, taken at various locations around town. The photos showed them dining together, walking in a park, and even sharing what appeared to be an intimate moment. I felt a surge of anger and sadness as I examined the pictures. It was clear that Claire had been seeing someone new, someone who was not Jason. I needed to confront her with this evidence, but I feared it would only lead to more conflict and further strain our already fragile relationship. When Claire came home that evening, I showed her the photographs. Explain these, I demanded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Claire's reaction was one of shock and guilt. I didn't mean for you to find these, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I was trying to figure things out and I didn't want to hurt you. Figure things out? I asked, my voice breaking. You're seeing someone else, Claire. How can you expect me to just accept this? Claire struggled to find the right words. I was confused and made mistakes. I didn't want to hurt you, but I needed to explore what was missing in my life. The admission was painful and disheartening. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. The person I thought I knew and trusted had been leading a double life, and the revelations left me reeling. As the evening drew to a close, Claire and I were left to grapple with the fallout of these discoveries. The trust that had already been so fragile was now shattered beyond repair. I needed time to process everything and decide what my next steps would be. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. The lies and deceit had reached a point where they could no longer be ignored. I was faced with the difficult decision of whether to continue fighting for a relationship that had been so deeply compromised or to move forward on my own. The days following our confrontation were marked by an uneasy truce. Claire and I navigated the house with an awkward distance between us. Although she was making efforts to be more transparent, her actions and the secrets I had uncovered continued to fuel my suspicions. Claire had promised to end her involvement with the mysterious man from the photographs, but I was far from convinced that the situation had been fully resolved. Her attempts to repair our relationship felt insincere, and her behavior remained erratic. She seemed to be trying hard to regain my trust, but the cracks in our relationship were too deep for simple reassurances. One afternoon, I found myself alone once again. I had been working on a project at home, but my mind kept drifting to the recent events. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were still things Claire wasn't telling me. I decided to keep a closer eye on her activities, hoping to uncover more about what was really going on. Claire had mentioned attending a wine event that evening, claiming it was an opportunity to network with industry professionals. I was hesitant to challenge her plans, but I decided to stay behind and observe, hoping to catch a glimpse of her true activities. While she was out, I found myself unable to resist going through some of her things once more. This time, I focused on her calendar and emails, looking for any signs of recurring patterns or hidden appointments. What I found was troubling. Claire's calendar was filled with vague entries like meeting or errands, but there were also several late-night appointments that she had not mentioned. I decided to check her email and found a string of correspondence between Claire and someone named James. The emails were about arranging meetings and discussing business, but there was a tone of familiarity that went beyond a professional relationship. James seemed to be someone Claire was quite close to, and the language in their email suggested a level of intimacy that made me uncomfortable. One email stood out in particular. It was an invitation from James for a private dinner. The email mentioned discussing personal matters and hinted at a level of intimacy that made my heart race. Claire had claimed that her affair was over, but these recent findings suggested otherwise. I decided to follow Claire that evening, driven by a mix of anxiety and determination. I kept my distance, ensuring that she wouldn't notice me trailing behind. She drove to a secluded part of town and parked outside a cozy restaurant that I didn't recognize. The establishment had an air of exclusivity, and it struck me as an unusual choice for a simple business meeting. I waited in the shadows as Claire entered the restaurant. A short while later, I saw James arrive and join her at a corner table. They greeted each other with a warm hug and exchanged intimate smiles before sitting down. My heart pounded as I watched them through the window, their interaction clearly more personal than professional. As they dined together, their conversation was animated and filled with laughter. They seemed to be in their own world, oblivious to the surroundings. The level of familiarity and affection between them was evident, and it was clear that their relationship went beyond mere friendship. I felt a surge of betrayal and hurt as I witnessed this scene. Claire had assured me that she was committed to fixing our relationship, but seeing her with James only reinforced my growing doubts. The fact that she had been dishonest about her whereabouts and meetings made me question everything she had told me. When Claire and James finally left the restaurant, I followed them back to Claire's car. I watched as they shared a brief, lingering kiss before parting ways. The sight left me devastated. It was clear that Claire's promises of ending her affair were not genuine. Returning home, I struggled with the decision of how to confront Claire. The evidence of her continued deceit was undeniable, and I knew that a confrontation was necessary. However, the pain of betrayal and the emotional toll of the situation left me feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about the future of our relationship. That night, as I lay in bed, I faced the reality of the situation. The trust that had been the foundation of our relationship was eroded beyond repair. I needed to decide whether to confront Claire with the undeniable evidence of her continued dishonesty or to make a clean break and move forward on my own. The following day, I felt the weight of our relationship's fragility more acutely than ever. Claire was out for a morning appointment, giving me the time I needed to gather my thoughts. The decision to confront her was weighing heavily on my mind. I had already witnessed enough to confirm my suspicions, but I needed to confront her with the truth and decide how to proceed. When Claire returned home, she seemed cheerful and in good spirits, her demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I waited until we were alone, and then I asked her to sit down with me in the living room. The air was thick with tension as I gathered the evidence I had found, the photographs, the emails, and the calendar entries. "Claire, we need to talk," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been patient and tried to give you space, but I can't ignore what I've seen any longer." Claire's expression shifted from confusion to apprehension. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath and laid out the evidence before her. I showed her the photographs of her with James and the emails that revealed their intimate correspondence. "I've been trying to understand what's going on between us, and I found these. They show that you've been seeing someone else and keeping secrets from me." Claire's face went pale as she took in the evidence. She looked visibly shaken and struggled to find words. I didn't want you to find out this way. I was trying to figure things out." "Figure things out?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "You've been dishonest with me. You've continued seeing James and hiding it. How am I supposed to trust you again after all this?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. Things got complicated and I made mistakes. James and I have been close, but I didn't mean for it to become this way. I thought you were committed to fixing our relationship, I said, my voice tinged with frustration. But this feels like another betrayal. I'm tired of being kept in the dark. Claire reached out for my hand, her voice pleading. Please, just hear me out. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. I'm willing to work on this if you are. The sincerity in her voice was apparent, but so was the pain of the repeated betrayals. I struggled with the decision of whether to give our relationship another chance or to walk away. The emotional weight of the situation was overwhelming, and I was torn between wanting to salvage what we had and needing to protect myself from further hurt. Claire, I said finally, I need to think about what's best for both of us. I can't make this decision right now. I need time to process everything and decide what's next. Claire nodded, her expression a mixture of sadness and understanding. I understand. Take all the time you need. I just hope that we can find a way to work through this. With that, I left the room to be alone with my thoughts. The confrontation had been painful and exhausting, but it was necessary. I needed to take the time to reflect on our relationship and decide whether it was worth continuing or if it was time to move on. As I lay in bed that night, I was filled with a sense of uncertainty and sorrow. The future of our relationship was now uncertain, and the path ahead was unclear. I had to grapple with my feelings of betrayal and disappointment while considering whether to fight for what we once had or to find the strength to move forward on my own. Days passed since the confrontation, and the silence between Claire and me was both a relief and a burden. I spent much of my time reflecting on our relationship and trying to decide the best course of action. The emotional toll was significant, and the weight of the decision I had to make was heavy. One afternoon, while Claire was out running errands, I decided to visit a local cafe that had become my refuge during this tumultuous time. I needed a change of scenery and a moment to clear my mind. As I sat in a corner booth with a cup of coffee, I noticed a familiar face at the counter. It was Maggie, the woman Claire had been in contact with. Seeing Maggie in person was a shock. I hadn't expected to encounter her, especially given the context. She ordered her drink and sat at a table near mine. I debated whether to approach her, but my curiosity and need for answers ultimately won out. I decided to strike up a conversation. I walked over to her table with a hesitant smile. Hi, Maggie. I didn't expect to see you here. Maggie looked up, surprised, and then managed a polite smile. Oh, hi. I didn't realize you'd be here. It's a nice place. I took a seat across from her, trying to maintain a casual demeanor. Yeah, it's become a bit of a sanctuary for me lately. I was hoping to clear my head. Maggie's expression softened with concern. Is everything okay? I hesitated, then decided to be straightforward. Actually, no. It's been a rough time. I've been dealing with some personal issues, and I noticed that you've been in touch with Claire. I was hoping you could help me understand what's been going on. Maggie looked taken aback but seemed willing to talk. I'm sorry to hear that things are tough. Claire and I have been in touch, but I didn't realize it was causing problems. What do you want to know? I explained the situation as best as I could, mentioning the emails, the photographs, and the secrecy surrounding her interactions with Claire. Maggie listened attentively and seemed genuinely concerned. Well, Maggie said after a pause, Claire and I have been friends for a while, but I had no idea there was any trouble between you two. I've been trying to help her sort out some personal issues, but I wasn't aware of any ongoing relationship. I was taken aback by her response. So you're saying that your contact with Claire was purely platonic? Maggie nodded. Yes, as far as I know. I've been trying to support her through some rough patches, but I wasn't aware of any ongoing issues with a man named James or anything like that. It sounds like there might be more going on than I knew. The conversation left me with more questions than answers. Maggie's account didn't entirely match the evidence I'd seen, and I was left wondering whether Claire had been hiding more than I realized. Thank you for your honesty, I said, feeling both relieved and confused. I guess I need to have another conversation with Claire to clarify things further. Maggie gave me a sympathetic smile. I hope things work out for you. Sometimes the situation isn't as straightforward as it seems. As I left the cafe, my mind was swirling with new possibilities. Maggie's comments introduced an unexpected twist to the situation. If Claire's interactions with James were not as Maggie described, Then what else had been hidden? I needed to confront Claire again, but this time with a new perspective. The mystery had deepened, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. That evening, when Claire returned home, I approached her with a renewed sense of urgency. Claire, we need to talk again. I spoke with Maggie today, and there are things I need to clarify with you. Claire looked concerned but resigned. All right, let's talk. The conversation was about to take a new turn, and I hoped it would bring me closer to understanding the full truth. The atmosphere in our home was charged with tension as Claire and I sat down for what promised to be another difficult conversation. The encounter with Maggie had left me with more questions than answers, and I was determined to confront Claire with these new revelations. Claire, I spoke with Maggie today, I began, trying to keep my tone steady. She told me that her contact with you was purely platonic, and that she wasn't aware of any ongoing issues with James or anyone else. This doesn't align with the evidence I've seen. Claire's face grew pale, and she looked visibly shaken. I didn't realize Maggie would say that. I thought she was aware of everything. Then what's going on? I pressed. If Maggie didn't know about James or your affair, then what are you hiding? Claire took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with tears. I've been trying to shield you from the full extent of what's happened. James and I had a more complicated relationship than I initially let on. Maggie wasn't involved in those parts of my life. What do you mean? I asked, my voice tight with frustration. Claire's shoulders slumped as she began to speak. James was someone I turned to for emotional support during a difficult time. Our relationship grew more complex, and while it was never purely about romance, it wasn't just a friendship either. I was trying to protect you from the pain of knowing that I was involved with someone else. So you were lying to me to protect me? I asked incredulously. Doesn't that make it worse? The deceit and secrecy are what hurt me the most. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I see that now. I should have been honest with you from the start. I thought I could manage it without causing you more pain. But I was wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to process her words. And what about the recent communications and the photos? Why did you continue seeing James and keeping it a secret? Claire looked down, unable to meet my eyes. James and I did have meetings and private discussions, but they were meant to address personal issues. It was a way for me to figure out what I wanted and to process my emotions. It was a mistake to let it continue as long as it did. My heart was heavy with the realization that Claire's actions were driven by a mixture of confusion and misguided attempts to protect me. The complexity of her emotions and relationships was becoming clearer, but it didn't necessarily make the situation easier to accept. I appreciate your honesty now, I said, my voice strained. But the damage has been done. The trust between us has been broken, and I don't know if we can ever fully rebuild it. Claire reached out for my hand, her voice pleading. I understand if you need time, or if you decide that you can't forgive me. I just want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I want to make amends if there's any chance of saving our relationship. I pulled my hand away gently, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. I need time to think. I'm not sure if I can continue this relationship after everything that's happened. I have to consider what's best for me and for us. Claire nodded, her expression a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. I understand. I'll give you the space you need. As Claire left the room, I was left alone with my thoughts. The confrontation had provided some clarity, but it also left me with a profound sense of loss. The complexity of Claire's situation and the ongoing deceit had taken a toll on our relationship, and I was left to grapple with the decision of whether to try to rebuild what had been broken or to move on entirely. The next steps were uncertain, and the path forward seemed fraught with emotional challenges. I needed to reflect on the nature of our relationship, the depth of the betrayal, and whether there was a way to move past the hurt and rebuild the trust that had been lost. The days following my conversation with Claire were filled with a quiet, reflective solitude. Claire had given me space as requested, but the emotional turmoil remained. I spent my time contemplating our relationship, the extent of Claire's betrayals, and the possibility of moving forward, either together or separately. One evening, I found myself walking through a park we used to frequent. The setting sun cast long shadows, and the familiar surroundings stirred memories of happier times. As I walked, I considered the pros and cons of continuing our relationship versus starting anew. I was seeking clarity in the peaceful environment, hoping for some insight into the decision I had to make. Later that week, Claire requested a meeting to discuss our future. She had agreed to respect my need for space, but wanted to address our situation one last time before any final decisions were made. I agreed, knowing that we needed to have a decisive conversation to resolve the uncertainty. We met at a small cafe that held a sentimental value for us, a place where we had shared many happy moments. The setting was both comforting and melancholic, reflecting the gravity of the conversation we were about to have. Claire arrived looking more composed than I had seen her in recent days. She greeted me with a tentative smile, and we settled at a corner table, away from the hustle and bustle of the cafe. The air between us was charged with anticipation and unease. "I wanted to thank you for agreeing to meet," Claire began, her voice steady but soft. "I know that things have been incredibly difficult, and I appreciate the chance to talk." I nodded, my expression serious. "I needed to hear what you have to say. I've been reflecting on everything, and I need to understand where we stand." Claire took a deep breath before speaking. "I know that I've made many mistakes, and I deeply regret the pain I've caused you. I want to be honest about my feelings and what I hope for our future. I've realized that I've been selfish and confused, and I want to make things right." She continued, her voice tinged with sincerity. "I've been seeing a therapist to work through my issues and understand my actions better. I'm committed to making changes and being more transparent. I know that rebuilding trust will be challenging, but I'm willing to put in the effort if you're open to it." I listened carefully, weighing her words. "I appreciate that you're taking steps to address your issues, but trust is not easily rebuilt. I need to know if you're genuinely committed to changing your behavior and being honest with me moving forward." Claire nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I am committed. I want to work through this, but I understand if you don't feel the same way. I'm prepared to accept whatever decision you make." The gravity of the moment pressed down on me. I had to decide whether to give our relationship another chance or to move on, taking with me the lessons learned from this painful experience. The decision was not only about forgiving Claire, but also about considering whether I could move forward with the emotional baggage that came with it. After a moment of silence, I spoke with a mix of resolve and sadness. "Claire, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship and the events that have transpired. I recognize your efforts to make amends, but I'm also aware of the deep wounds that have been inflicted. I need to be honest with myself and with you." Claire's expression was one of apprehension. "What are you saying?" "I've decided that it's best for both of us to part ways," I said, my voice steady but filled with sorrow. "I believe that moving on separately is the most constructive path for us at this point. The trust has been deeply damaged, and I need to prioritize my own well-being and future." Claire's face fell and she nodded slowly, accepting the reality of my decision. "I understand. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find the peace and happiness you deserve." We parted ways with a mixture of sadness and acceptance. The decision to end our relationship was not made lightly, but it felt like the necessary step to move forward and heal from the hurt we had both experienced. As I walked away from the cafe, I felt a sense of relief and closure. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew that I had made the right decision for myself. The journey of healing and self-discovery was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace the future with a sense of hope and determination. In the weeks following our separation, I focused on rebuilding my life and finding a new sense of normalcy. The process of moving on was both challenging and liberating. I immersed myself in activities and routines that helped me regain my footing and rediscover my sense of self. One of the first things I did was reconnect with old friends and family. The support and understanding I received from them were invaluable. I also took up new hobbies and pursued interests that I had set aside during the turmoil of the past months. Engaging in these activities provided a much-needed distraction and allowed me to rebuild my identity outside of the relationship. One day, while browsing through a local art gallery, a place I had always enjoyed but rarely visited, I found solace in the beauty and creativity surrounding me. The experience was cathartic, offering a fresh perspective on life and a reminder of the simple joys that I had neglected during the difficult times with Claire. During this period of self-discovery, I also sought professional counseling to help process the emotional impact of the separation. The therapy sessions provided a safe space to explore my feelings and gain insight into how to move forward. I learned valuable coping strategies and developed a greater understanding of my own needs and desires. As time passed, I began to feel a sense of renewal and hope. I started dating again, albeit cautiously. Meeting new people and forming connections helped me realize that I was capable of building meaningful relationships once more. While the process of dating was sometimes daunting, it also offered the possibility of new beginnings and fresh experiences. One evening, I found myself at a small gathering with friends. The atmosphere was relaxed, and the conversation flowed easily. It was during this event that I met someone new, Anna. She was warm, engaging, and had a genuine kindness that drew me in. We connected on several levels, and our conversations were filled with laughter and shared interests. As I spent more time with Anna, I found myself enjoying the companionship and the sense of connection that had been missing for so long. Our interactions were refreshing and devoid of the complications that had characterized my relationship with Claire. Anna's presence in my life was a reminder of the possibility of joy and fulfillment. I was honest with Anna about my recent past and the journey I had been on. Her understanding and empathy were reassuring, and she offered a non-judgmental space for me to be myself. Our growing friendship gradually evolved into something more, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. One day, while reflecting on how far I had come, I realized that I had reached a point of acceptance and healing. The pain of the past was no longer an overwhelming burden, but rather a chapter in my life that had contributed to my growth and understanding. As I moved forward, I was grateful for the lessons learned and the strength I had gained. The process of letting go and starting anew had been challenging, but it had also been a journey of self-discovery and personal growth. I embraced the future with optimism and an open heart, ready to explore the possibilities that lay ahead. The experience with Claire had been a profound and transformative one, and it had ultimately led me to a place of renewed clarity and hope. I was now focused on building a life that was authentic and fulfilling, with the understanding that each new chapter held the potential for happiness and growth. As I settled into my new routine and embraced the fresh possibilities in my life, Claire was also navigating her own journey of change and self-discovery. The end of our relationship marked a significant turning point for her, and she was determined to use this time to reflect on her actions and make meaningful changes in her life. Claire threw herself into her work and personal growth, attending therapy regularly to address her past issues and understand her behavior better. Her commitment to self-improvement was evident, and she worked hard to gain insight into the mistakes she had made and how to prevent them in the future. One day, Claire reached out to me with a request to meet. I was hesitant but agreed, recognizing the importance of closure and understanding from both sides. We chose a neutral location, a park where we could talk privately and comfortably. When Claire arrived, she seemed more composed and confident than she had been in the past. She greeted me with a warm, genuine smile, and we found a quiet spot under a large oak tree to sit and talk. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Claire said, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I wanted to share some of the changes I've been working on and express my gratitude for the lessons I've learned." I nodded, giving her a reassuring look. "I'm glad you're making progress. What have you been focusing on?" Claire took a deep breath and began to speak. "I've been attending therapy regularly and working through my issues. I've also taken up new hobbies and engaged in activities that help me grow personally and professionally. I've been trying to understand my own needs better and how to build healthier relationships." Her sincerity was apparent, and it was clear that she had been putting in considerable effort to address her past mistakes. "That's good to hear. It sounds like you're making positive changes," Claire continued, her voice reflecting a mix of regret and hope. "I wanted to apologize again for everything that happened between us. I realize now how much my actions hurt you, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused. I hope you can find it in yourself to forgive me." I looked at her, taking in her heartfelt words. "I appreciate your apology and the effort you're making to change. Forgiveness is a process, and while I'm still working through my own feelings, I'm glad to see that you're taking steps to improve." Claire smiled, a sense of relief and hope in her eyes. "Thank you. I know that forgiveness and healing take time, and I'm not expecting anything immediate. I just wanted to be honest about my journey and the changes I'm making. We talked for a while longer, discussing our individual paths and how we were both moving forward. The conversation was amicable and provided a sense of closure for both of us. It was clear that despite the difficulties we had faced, we were each finding our way and growing from the experience. As we said our goodbyes, there was a sense of mutual respect and understanding. Claire's journey of self-discovery was an important part of her healing process, and I wished her well as she continued to work on herself. As I walked away from the park, I felt a sense of closure and peace. The chapter with Claire had come to an end, and both of us were moving forward with a renewed focus on our personal growth and future possibilities. The lessons learned and the changes made were integral to our respective journeys, and I embraced the future with a sense of optimism and readiness for the new experiences that awaited. With Claire and me having reached a point of closure, my focus shifted to fully embracing my new life and the opportunities it offered. I had spent months rebuilding my sense of self and exploring new possibilities, and now it was time to actively pursue the new beginnings that lay ahead. One of the most significant changes was my decision to relocate to a different city. The move was symbolic of a fresh start and offered a chance to immerse myself in a new environment. The decision to leave was not made lightly. It was a step toward creating a new chapter away from the memories and emotional baggage of the past. The relocation process was both exciting and challenging. I spent weeks packing up my belongings, organizing logistics, and preparing for the transition. The sense of change was invigorating, and I was eager to embrace the new experiences that awaited me. Upon arriving in the new city, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The unfamiliar streets and neighborhoods represented a blank slate, a canvas upon which I could build a new life. I spent the first few days exploring my surroundings, familiarizing myself with local landmarks, and finding new favorite spots, like cozy cafes and scenic parks. One day, as I was settling into my new apartment, I received a message from Anna, whom I had been dating casually. We had maintained our connection despite the distance and occasional absences due to my move. Anna had expressed an interest in visiting, and I was thrilled to see her again. Anna arrived in the city, and we spent time exploring together. Her presence was a source of comfort and joy, and our relationship continued to develop in a positive and natural way. We shared many new experiences, from attending local events to enjoying the diverse culinary offerings of the city. Our time together helped solidify our bond and provided a sense of continuity amid the changes. As the months went by, I began to settle into my new routine. I focused on my career, took up new hobbies, and engaged in social activities that helped me build a new support network. The sense of independence and self-discovery was empowering, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose and direction. One afternoon, while attending a local community event, I had a chance encounter with a former colleague from my previous city. It was unexpected but pleasant, and we caught up on each other's lives. The encounter reinforced the feeling that while the past was behind me, the connections I had made were still valuable and significant. The new city offered opportunities for growth and exploration, and I embraced each experience with an open mind. The process of moving on was not without its challenges, but it also brought a sense of fulfillment and renewal. I continued to focus on building a life that reflected my values and aspirations, free from the shadows of past relationships. As I looked forward to the future, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the lessons learned and the strength gained from my experiences. The journey had been difficult, but it had ultimately led me to a place of personal growth and optimism. I embraced the new beginnings with a hopeful heart, ready to face whatever opportunities and challenges lay ahead. As the seasons changed and I settled into my new life, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had undergone. The move to a new city had brought a sense of renewal, and the experiences of the past year had left a lasting impact on me. I spent time contemplating the lessons learned, the growth achieved, and the path I wanted to follow moving forward. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, I decided to write a letter to myself. It was an exercise in reflection and self-affirmation, a way to document my thoughts and resolutions as I continued to build my future. In the letter, I recounted the challenges I had faced, the betrayal, the heartache, and the journey of self-discovery. I acknowledged the pain and the mistakes made, but I also recognized the strength I had gained and the positive changes that had resulted. I wrote about the importance of forgiveness, not only towards others, but also towards myself. The letter became a form of catharsis, allowing me to articulate my thoughts and feelings clearly. It served as a reminder of how far I had come and a reaffirmation of the values and goals I wanted to pursue. I expressed my commitment to maintaining the personal growth I had achieved and to continuing the journey of self-improvement. As I finished writing, I felt a sense of closure and resolution. The letter was a testament to my resilience and a guide for the future. It was a way to honor the past while looking forward with hope and determination. In addition to personal reflections, I began to consider the broader aspects of my life and the future I envisioned. I set new goals for myself, both professionally and personally. I wanted to continue growing in my career, exploring new interests, and building meaningful connections with others. One of the goals I set was to contribute to the community in my new city. I became involved in local volunteering efforts, using my skills and experiences to make a positive impact. The act of giving back provided a sense of purpose and fulfillment, and it connected me with others who shared similar values. The process of giving back also offered a new perspective on life. It reminded me of the importance of community and the power of supporting one another. Through volunteering, I met new people and formed valuable connections, further enriching my experience in the new city. As the year came to a close, I took time to reflect on my journey once more. The challenges I had faced and the lessons I had learned were integral to my growth. The experiences had shaped me into a stronger, more self-aware individual, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunities that had emerged from adversity. In the final entry of my letter, I expressed my hopes for the future. I wished for continued personal growth, meaningful relationships, and the ability to embrace new opportunities with an open heart. I resolved to remain true to myself, to continue learning and evolving, and to approach life with a sense of optimism and resilience. As I sealed the letter and placed it in a safe place, I felt a profound sense of peace and readiness. The journey had been transformative, and I was prepared to face the future with confidence and hope. The reflections and resolutions marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promise and possibility. The new year brought with it a sense of anticipation and optimism. As I continued to embrace the changes in my life, I found that the foundation I had built was allowing me to explore new possibilities and relationships with a renewed sense of purpose. One sunny Saturday morning, I decided to take a day trip to a nearby town known for its historic charm and vibrant arts scene. The excursion was an opportunity to step away from the familiar and immerse myself in a new environment. I enjoyed wandering through quaint streets, visiting local galleries, and savoring the unique culinary offerings of the town. During my visit, I encountered a local festival celebrating art and culture. The event was lively and engaging, featuring performances, exhibits, and interactive activities. As I explored the festival, I came across a booth for a local art class. Intrigued, I signed up for a short workshop on abstract painting, eager to try something new and creative. The art class proved to be both enjoyable and enlightening. I found solace in the process of painting, using colors and shapes to express emotions and ideas. The experience was a reminder of the importance of creativity and self-expression in my life. It also provided an opportunity to meet new people and engage in meaningful conversations. At the end of the workshop, I struck up a conversation with one of the instructors, Emma. She was passionate about her craft and had a warm, inviting personality. Our discussion about art, life, and personal growth was both stimulating and inspiring. Emma's enthusiasm for her work and her openness made it easy to connect with her. As the weeks went by, I continued to participate in various art-related activities and classes, often crossing paths with Emma. Our interactions grew more frequent, and we found ourselves developing a genuine friendship. Emma's presence in my life was refreshing and positive, and she encouraged me to explore my artistic interests further. One evening, as we were discussing a recent art exhibit, Emma invited me to collaborate on a community art project. The project aimed to bring together local artists and residents to create a mural that would reflect the town's spirit and diversity. I was excited by the idea and eagerly accepted the invitation. Working on the mural with Emma and the other participants was a rewarding experience. The project not only allowed me to contribute to the community, but also provided a sense of accomplishment and connection. The mural became a symbol of collaboration and creativity, and I was proud to be a part of it. As the project concluded, Emma and I continued to spend time together, exploring our shared interests and enjoying each other's company. Our relationship evolved naturally from friendship to something deeper. We both valued open communication, mutual respect, and a shared sense of purpose. One evening, as we watched the sunset from a park overlooking the town, Emma took my hand and smiled. "I'm grateful for the journey that led us here. It's amazing how new beginnings can bring unexpected and wonderful changes." I squeezed her hand gently, feeling a sense of contentment and hope. "I couldn't agree more. The past year has been transformative, and meeting you has been a meaningful part of that journey." As we continued to build our relationship, I felt a renewed sense of optimism and excitement for the future. The experiences of the past had shaped me into a more resilient and self-aware person, and the new path I was forging with Emma was a testament to the possibilities that lay ahead. Looking back on the journey from the beginning to this new chapter, I was grateful for the lessons learned and the growth achieved. The challenges and changes had ultimately led me to a place of fulfillment and connection, and I embraced the future with a sense of joy and anticipation. The new path was one of hope and promise, and I was ready to explore it with an open heart.